This episode is brought to you by Instant Impact. Instant Impact provides transformative talent solutions to small and mid-sized companies that are making between 30 and 500 hires each year. If your recruitment's giving you a headache and you don't know where to start, then give the team at Instant Impact a call or visit www.instant-impact.com for more information.
There'll be more people voting in elections globally than in any year ever before in history. On my side of the Atlantic, Labour's just taken over government for the first time since 2007. Meanwhile, on your side of the Atlantic, campaigning rages on, and we're going to have an election in November. But there's also been elections in India and all over the world. It feels like every year our society becomes more fractured and more segmented. And it seems more important than ever to foster a truly harmonious workforce. So that's what we're going to get into today. I'm really excited to be joined by Renuka Iyer, who's the Chief People and Culture Officer of Pharma. Renuka has been in the HR space for her whole career. We're going to hear about that a little bit later. But Renuka, I couldn't think of anyone better to dive into this topic with. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Felix. It's wonderful to be here with you. Yes, this is an important topic, and I'm glad that we're talking about it.
So before we jump into the topic, could you just give listeners just a little bit of a feel for who you are and what your experience in the space has been like?
Sure. So, my name, it's Renuka Iyer, and I'm here speaking to you from Washington, D.C. in my office space. I work for Pharma. We are an organization that does advocacy in the space for making sure that medicines reach all the population as it's intended, and there is innovation in medicine. And the way we go about this is we advance policies that the government could support that will, advance innovation and ensure access to medicine. So that's what we do. I run HR. I'm particularly interested in ensuring that we have and create a culture in which civil conversations can happen, especially being in an advocacy organization. It's important that we're looking at, both parties here in the US, of course, and that we're having dialogues that really reach across the aisle, and so we can, make sure that we stay focused on what the mission of the organization is, which is health equity for all.
Well, with such an important mission, health equity, couldn't think of anything more important. Being in an advocacy organization and in the midst of it all in Washington, D.C., it feels like a number of different things are coming together for this conversation. So I've really noticed, I think, this trend towards society finding civil conversations, as you put it, challenging. I think it's got really bad in society as a whole and around the dinner table. And I'd love to understand what it is that you do in your organization to foster those sorts of nuanced conversations where people really listen to each other.
I could think of several things, and I'm going to just maybe more broadly answer the question. So it's not only focused on the work that Pharma does, but more importantly, when we're having conversations at home with our family, other friends who have different opinions than the ones that we hold so dearly. I think the first and most important thing is being absolutely clear about what it is that you stand for, and why. What made you stand for the ideas and opinions that you hold so dearly? Oftentimes, I think when people are not very clear about what it is they stand for, it's hard for them to get to the next step, which is communicating them. So I'll get to communication in just a bit. But before I get there, I think it is important to have a curious mindset, because not everyone will hold the same ideas and opinions simply because they haven't been raised and had the experiences that you've had in your life. And so they will have different experiences as a result of which they will have different opinions. So generating or creating a curious mindset is so critical. And then the ability to actively listen to someone else is important. It's important that to be understood, we've got to understand first. And so active listening and then communicating that clear ideas that you have, communicating them in a manner that is easily understandable by someone that is not in your domain, I think is important. Oftentimes we speak in jargons, and that doesn't really help because people don't understand the jargon. They misunderstand it, and then they'd also not really know what's the context you're coming from. So when someone is communicating it, making sure that the ideas that are being communicated are simple, that there is a good, you talk like you create a business case and bring them along in the conversation. I think those are the four skills that are critical and necessary: clarity of thought, a curious mindset, active listening, and then communicating a business case along with the context of why you stand for certain things. And that then will allow a good exchange of ideas. And I think here at Pharma, we practice some of that, being very clear and staying focused to what is it that the message we're trying to get across, and how do we get across the message such that it is interesting to the others that we need to communicate with.
That's so interesting. There's so much to unpack there. Maybe let's start with the first element, which is getting that clarity of thought over what you believe. Easily said, harder to do sometimes. What are some of the steps that someone might take to sort of achieve that clarity of thought and really understand why they feel a certain way, why they have a particular opinion?
Yeah, I think, I'd like to go to the second point and then bring that back. So I talked about the curious mindset. Um, you know, I can talk about my own life and how I was raised with certain ideas that were simply thrust. I mean, I think this is true of all human beings. When we go to school, certain ideas are thrust upon us. When we are in university, certain ideas are thrust upon us, and we begin to develop our own vision of the world. And continuing to stay open to changing those views. I mean, we're living in an information age. And when we're thinking about how do we get clear about our own vision and ideas, making sure that we access data and not simply say, hey, here's my idea of something, and I'm just going to stick to it, right? Making sure that we're checking our own ideas and notions and finding evidence in terms of data. And then based on that evidence, forming a clear idea of what is the state of affairs as it relates to whatever someone is discussing, right? That I think is important. And oftentimes I don't think that is happening. People will have those ideas simply because of their past experiences and what they have heard, and not necessarily, really dig into what does the data say about this, and therefore what is my opinion about this? How do I see this? That kind of clarity takes some work.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I think it's actually, I think that point around getting the data and getting expert advice on a topic, it feels like it's getting harder and harder. I mean, there's so much talk about, I don't know, 10 years ago, I feel like if you read something in a reputable news source, you pretty much go away and assume that it's fact. But I speak to people who essentially don't believe any major news sources, get their news from social media, and it's really challenging. And I think you see those very unnuanced perspectives gaining ground very, very quickly. So in a world where there's both so much information out there and so much conflicting information out there, where do you start with that kind of process?
Yeah, I mean, I think so true, right? I mean, with the AI age, now we're talking about deep fakes. You don't even know whether you're speaking to an actual human or that is
It's
in,
terrifying.
something that AI has created. Yeah, yeah. So that's the world that we are in, and I think that the way to crack that code is by doing two things. One, suspending one's own judgment and paying attention, like really close attention. And when that doesn't happen, when people don't stop to pay attention, then it is very possible that either their own biases may maybe playing into their decisions, or that they may just be with all the misinformation and the disinformation that's out there, that they may just be a victim of some of that. So I think paying attention is really, really critical, and suspending judgment, not taking anything just at face value, investing a little bit more time. If you would normally take 5 minutes to read something and make an opinion about it, I'd say invest 10, right? So double the time and take the time to really pay attention before you can make your judgment. Now, if you were not going to make a judgment and continue to be open, that's all right. You can just consume all the information that's out there. But once when you are going after clarity, I think it's important to take the time to really know what it is and why is it that you're taking that stand.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. And we're in a world where we're encouraged to jump to decisions and conclusions so quickly, but just taking a little bit of extra time can be so powerful. Renuka, how do you? I mean, I love that as a framework for sort of self-knowledge and self-management of this. How do you bring that into a workplace? How do you bring that kind of pause for clarity into a day-to-day when it can be so challenging?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And one way to think about that is, I'm in HR, and oftentimes people ask me, what do I do to get ahead in my career? And I tell them, pay attention to your craft. The way to get ahead is, it has to start with oneself. And when I say oneself, it is everyone in the organization, including the leaders, including everyone else. And people naturally gravitate towards those that have ideas that stick and can take those ideas to action, right? So that those are the types of people that we normally would gravitate to. And the only way that anyone can do that is by paying attention to what they are doing. So I'd say start with yourself first. Automatically, including your managers, when your managers see what you're doing, they're like, oh, this person is really thoughtful. Their ideas. Yes, they may take a few extra minutes or a few extra hours to get back to me, or maybe even a few extra days or weeks to get back to me. But when they get back to me, the work product is of high quality, and because of which I can depend on them. So I think, starting with oneself could be the first step. The other thing, when you start with yourself, it is super, super important to follow through on your commitments. So let's just say that the supervisor says, hey, can you work on this? And you need a bit more time to really pay attention. And then, they say, can you give me back this product by tomorrow? And let's say you need until the end of the week to complete it. And maybe you're on Monday and they want it by Tuesday and you want till the end of the week. It would be perfectly all right if you write back to them and say, hey, I need some more time to think about these issues and to give you a more thoughtful answer. Might I respond to you by Friday? And you can buy time, but make sure that you follow through on Friday and either give them back the work product, or respond with, hey, here's what I'm finding out. Looks like this is a rabbit hole and I need a little bit more time to do this research. So it's okay to change those commitments by keeping your supervisor informed. But it is absolutely important to, with integrity, align your actions to your words. I think that is the second part. Following through on your commitments is the second part of creating a space for clarity and creating space for attention. And then when your manager sees it, they may want to do it as well, and then others will want to follow.
It's really interesting. I think it's such a common challenge in organizations, the constant feeling like you have to get a deliverable done as soon as possible, the sort of constant hamster wheel of chasing deadlines. I think you're so right. If you within your career craft a reputation and a methodology of taking time and being considerate and being thoughtful about a topic, that's going to rub off in all sorts of areas as well. I wonder on the other side of things, I guess that's how you have clarity in yourself. How do you build a culture that's respectful of other people's perspectives, even if you've created a lot of individuals with clarity. How do you create that respect of other people's truths or other people's perspectives?
I mean, I've come across people who have this mentality of know it all. I mean, you must have heard these words, know it all, right? People who think that they've gotten every piece of the puzzle. And it is absolutely impossible for anyone to have all the pieces of the puzzle, simply because when you look at a certain situation from different angles, you're going to be able to have different opinions, different ideas. So anyone that does not stay curious and does not suspend judgment is actually doing themselves a disservice, because they are not going to be in conversations and in situations where they really know it all, right? So I just say that is just it's an absolute disservice to yourself to not stay curious. And for anyone that wants to get ahead in their career, that's the first step, to stay curious and to stay humble. I think humility is the other thing that I would tack on to that. I don't think you can stay curious if you're not humble. Um, and I mean, the more data you have, the better your work quality is going to be. And you can only get that data. People will support you and be willing to help you and provide that information to you only when there is humility and curiosity, when they experience it, right? It's about how others experience you, and that is only possible if you want that. It's a choice, I think, we make. I don't know that it is, I don't. Well, does it come naturally to human beings? Absolutely. I think when we were all, when we were kids, we were all curious about anything that was happening around us. So is it an innate quality? Absolutely, yes. But as we become adults, I think it is a choice we have to make, to stay curious and to stay humble or not. There are times when, you know, we snap at others, and then the question to ask is, hey, is that the best version of myself? And if the answer is no, then to make a choice to be the best version of yourself every minute it's a choice. And it can only happen when you are paying attention um, to what is going inside of you, what's happening inside of you, your mindset, and how you're communicating with another. So to be respectful of all opinions, I think it starts with oneself. And then I think the other thing is, I'm just thinking about the HR community. Oftentimes when HR is when we do our work, we talk about work culture. Someone once told me, instead of thinking about work culture, think about group dynamics. What is the group dynamics in this group? When we begin to ask questions like that, every person in the group owns the dynamics of that group. And so it kind of helps people really think about, do we want to have a pleasant experience in this group or a not so pleasant experience in this group? And if we do want to have a pleasant experience, then everyone kind of, slows down, takes a moment to appreciate the different opinions from others. And then I'll have one last trick that I learned in my career, which is the yes and technique, right? So if you hear an idea that's different from yours, just do yes, and then you can position a counter idea, and that the sense of yes and really helps expand, the idea itself. It makes sure that the other person that is speaking with you feels respected, feels heard, and feels inclusive. And I think so. Those are some of the techniques that I think I've used myself and had some success with.
That's really useful. I love the yes and technique as well. I think it's really powerful. I suppose within the organization then, or within organizations you've worked in the past, um, how important has your management community, your team of managers, been on fostering that workforce, that workplace dynamic you were talking about before? I know you said everyone's responsible for creating it, but are there some people who are more responsible for creating that dynamic than others?
Yeah, I think it's important to know what piece of the puzzle one owns and in what capacity. When you think about senior leadership in an organization, have several roles. They are also managers to some people. They may be, so not only are they like first line managers to some people, they are also managers of managers, right? So it is important to think about all the different roles that one plays in their particular job, and being able to identify whether you have the ability or the power to I'm using both those words because I think especially when you're in leadership, there is a certain power that comes along with the position itself. So being aware of that and making sure that we're creating an environment in which there can be respectful conversations, creating policies that don't allow for conversations that are not respectful, for example. If someone is in that position, I know in HR I am in that position where we're creating policies and processes and guidelines for how communication can happen within the organization, what's allowable, what's not. So learning what your position is, appreciating it, and really taking ownership of that, because I think all of us want to be in a place where there is less drama and where we can just get on with our work and do the work. And all of us here, including the CEO, and this is true for every organization, everyone is here because we want to do the best we can every single day. That's what we come. No one comes to work in the morning and says, you know what, today I'm going to be the worst version of myself. No, everyone comes in hoping that they can be the best version of themselves and that they can earn their living for that day. So having that appreciation that all of us are in this for the same reason, and therefore from that commonality, how can we be the best version of ourselves when we're communicating with another human, I think is important. I think it definitely starts with one person.
I really agree. I feel like, well, I suppose I, like you, am in a lucky position where I suppose might have a disproportionate impact on the culture than I would if it wasn't a business that I run. But I definitely it really resonates with me in sort of other group dynamics that if you want to create a humble listening culture, the best way of doing it is by being humble and listening and just starting to role model the behaviors that you want to see in others, because everyone wants, at the core of our humanity is a desire to get along with others and to be able to thrive individually. You're right. Sometimes that gets lost, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And I think also it's important to pay attention to, I think in your question you asked about how do you foster that amongst the management team. There have been times, I can't remember a time here when I was working in pharma, but in my career, there have been times where, there was one particular manager that I was working with whose actions didn't have the desired impact. And so making sure that, you pull that manager aside and say, hey, I heard you say this, or your team, one of your team members told me that you said this. Can you help me understand what was your intention? What were you trying to do when you were saying these things? And then hearing the person out and then say, hey, you know what? That was not how that landed. And here's how it landed. And here are some other ideas for how you might communicate that. And really beginning to partner with them can be the first step in helping them see how others are viewing them, right? How others are perceiving them. But what happens when you create that kind of a partnership is the ability to communicate that you respect that individual for no matter what their behavior is going to be, and you're on their side. And that then allows you to bring transformation where it's necessary.
I love that. I think that's the sort of encapsulates the sort of partnership mentality, doesn't it? That's really interesting. Just a little aware of time here. I'm really fascinated by this concept that pharma. You've got an election coming up. Presumably, you're positioning yourselves with both the Democrats and the Republicans at the moment, because whoever wins in November, it's going to be important for you to have that relationship. And presumably, there are a number of you've got hundreds of people in the organization. There are going to be people who feel strongly one way or the other. Has has it ever been difficult for people in the organization to work with people externally because of their political party? I mean, if you've got a really staunch Democrat on your team, would they ever find it difficult to have that harmonious relationship with a Republican lawmaker that you're looking to lobby for example? I might be using completely the wrong terminology, by the way, but bear with me.
No, I get your question. So I think the answer to that question is no. And let me tell you why. I think it's important to talk about why it's not difficult for Pharma and our staff to reach out to both parties and both sides of the aisle. The reason for that is we are extremely focused on making sure that there is innovation in medicine, and that all our member companies are focused on innovation, and that there's an environment in which innovation can happen. And two, that the access for drugs and medicines are open and accessible by all people, right? So given that that is our focus, that is our North Star, it doesn't really matter whether we're speaking to the Republicans or to the Democrats. Yes, I agree that there are some policy ideas that are more favorable by one party than the other, but that is because it's that a particular point in time, isn't it? And the market shifts, ideas shift. It's the world of information, and so when and I believe that even our politicians, when they have the information that is necessary for them to understand how these innovation, drugs that are being innovated by most of our member companies, all our member companies, in fact, how, what are the hurdles as they, for example, the middlemen, right? And understanding all of that, I think when politicians really understand the landscape, then they are able to make different decisions. Pharma spends a lot of time educating them about these matters. Our policy and research team, we do a lot of work around, giving guidance for what might happen if the government decides a certain policy. What are the impacts of this policy long term, over 10 years, over 20 years? And there are, we do some research papers and things like that we posted on our website. So I think education is important. Staying true to the data, staying true to the research we do is important, and not shying away from people that have different opinions than what one has is also important, and doing so in a respectful way. I think that takes courage, and Pharma certainly has a lot of that.
That sounds really interesting, and I can't believe we're out of time because I've got so many other questions. But I mean, it sounds like you guys are doing incredible work. So first of all, thank you for doing that. And I really, really enjoyed our conversation today. I think you've made me think about this topic it feels a lot less big when you're focusing on the human and on the impact that you can have as an individual, and the impact that you can have on others just by focusing on yourself. And in a lot of ways, I feel much more optimistic about everything now than when we started. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Felix. It was wonderful talking to you.